Hello, and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking to Bennett Cerf, the DP of the film Users, as well as a few others. This, obviously. I say that because this episode is not focused on the film at all. I was actually not able to get a screener for it, so we talk about nearly everything else. And by that, I mean 4 hours worth. We spoke for 3 hours and 42 minutes. So this episode is going to be cut down quite substantially, but it's a lot of fun if you are a gearhead, if you're a nerd, if you are an owner-operator, if you edit your own stuff. We go through all of it. It's a very technical episode. Obviously it's going to be cut down, but we were thinking for all the off-topic stuff we went through, maybe starting a side episode called Frame and Reference Martini Shot, where we just put all the off-topic stuff, but at the same time, this might just have to be a two-parter. We'll see. I'm about to go edit it now. And actually, if you're watching, my light just went away. It was really pretty there for like 30 seconds. Anyway, here's my episode with Bennett Cerf. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, we'll just roll into this intro.
Yeah, thanks. We actually shot Users at 24 frames instead of 23.98 because I think we just can all admit that we've been doing 23.98 and 29.97 for really no reason for a long time. I mean,
technically I am at 24 right now.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I have this weird theory that we can tell.
Like humans can tell the difference
between 23.98 and 24. I don't know why. It's like the motion cadence thing, which I know is like, it's more global shutter versus rolling shutter, but like in my head, that 0.02 matters for some reason.
Right. Well, if you're looking at a Sony camera, it probably does make a difference.
Yeah.
Sonys are definitely, I notice weird motion artifacting with all Sony cameras. It's not perfect. I mean, the Venice maybe is okay, but
you have an FS7?
I do, yeah. I think it's been a great moneymaker, but now...
Well, especially for doc.
Yeah. And I'm not necessarily like a doc filmmaker, but I've definitely had to make money doing stuff that it includes live events because I just can make more money doing it.
Right.
For companies that really do like... They do higher quality stuff, and the FS7 can pull it off depending on what kind of dynamic range your scene is.
Right.
But man, I'm happy that these newer cameras have arrived. Like, for instance, this is what I should have used for this one. Somebody just sent me the Komodo for a job that's coming up, which seems cool because I've got a Komodo, but on the other hand, it's like, oh, there's no AC working on this right up front, so I have to do it. But
yeah, how do you feel about the Komodo? I was trying to hit up Film Tools to because Film Tools and ProVideo Coalition are under the same parent company, so it's kind of you're dealing with the same people. And I was like, hey, part of my job at ProVideo is reviewing gear, and I was like, send me that Komodo, and they're like, dude, we can't even get a hold of one.
Yeah, they said that they did something special to get the company that I'm working for was able to get a Stormtrooper one. I think that's what the white one is supposed to be called.
Yeah, and those were like pre-orders, so I think they knew how many they were going to make.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like somebody maybe didn't like it and was ready to move on because it has a number of hours on it already, but maybe it was, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a pump and dump thing where people bought a bunch of them in pre-order and then sold half of them.
Sure.
I had a friend who did that with their phone, the Hydrogen.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Kind of
were you able to check that out?
What's that?
Were you able to get a look at that?
Yeah, I saw it momentarily and I was thinking, well, okay. I mean, it's just not, it seemed like their eyes were on the wrong thing. And they may have overestimated the wider appeal of of a phone that isn't so niche.
Yeah, I mean, especially the there was a photo that they showed me. I think they took a photo of me and my friends like outside a bar. A guy at the bar had it, and and the photo with that cool depth 3D thing that looked cool. And then we were watching video, and I was like, this doesn't seem to translate for me.
Yeah. I think it's a big promise. I feel like we're always watching camera companies try to achieve things that they can only do in certain circumstances, but not all circumstances. I think that's what everybody equates to secret sauce.
Right.
You know, it's like raw doesn't mean raw necessarily in any way, shape, or form. And I think that all the buzz terms like dual ISO are a little bit misleading. And I think that ultimately what people are trying to sell you on is something that's going to break down because of their special sauce. It doesn't quite work in every situation. And man, you really just have to know your camera, or else you're going to walk right into something. And then directors and producers are looking at you going like, well, why doesn't it do this thing? And it's like, gee, you know, it was all sold on this particular premise. But there's like, I feel like Arri is one of the few companies that makes their secret sauce relatively public. You can actually look at it, you know, easily, like in Nuke or whatever, and pick apart the image and see what it's really doing. Red, on the other hand, has gotten a little bit more transparent about it, but I don't think that they want anyone to know exactly what they're doing.
No, and I mean, they're the reason that raw technology is so difficult to implement, because they keep suing everyone who tries to do a version. Because what was their patent? It basically says like any form of raw recording is red code.
Right.
It's like,
which is pretty insane. I mean, even Apple lost a lawsuit with them to try to actually use their technology. But I mean, with the Komodo, they've actually moved on. They're not doing
because it
raw.
shoots ProRes, huh?
It does ProRes, but it also does it's a different red raw now. Which is way more file size heavy. It's huge compared to what they were doing before. So now it's actually easier for your computer to handle it. So you
having to get that $5,000 red rocket from back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Because they've moved on. Instead of wavelet, they're using discrete cosine, which is essentially getting closer to ProRes at that point.
Do you find that shooting red, you primarily have to shoot red code, or are you okay with their compressed? Because like, you know, log C ProRes is sick. You know, the XFAVC on these is dope.
The thing is, I haven't worked with a red camera, and I don't think they've made one yet that can record beyond 422 HQ. And that's roughly equivalent of like what my FS7 can do as far as the codec is concerned, not camera wise or sensor wise. So I find that I can't really use the ProRes for anything other than proxies to give to post. And we shot on the Gemini on that movie Users that was in Sundance, and we found a slight a bug in the system, just a logical bug, which is that the proxy is one long file, but all the red files are broken up by 4 GB.
Right, because they're just using standard SSDs in there, aren't they? In their fancy little box.
Right.
And that because it's FAT32, and so it needs to break it up into 4 gigs.
Yeah, in essence, yeah, that's the file size max. And so yeah, like even the UDP formatting is the same problem. So it's like you couldn't use those to edit with, unfortunately. Which is funny because DJI has the opposite problem. If you run ProRes, the ProRes files break up when you run XQ 444XQ on it on the Inspire 2. I remember I used to shoot a lot of commercials for DJI, and every time they would make a new format for their drones, I would try to use it because I was like, oh, this is so much better quality. And then the post team would be like, I'm pretty sure we're going to murder you if you come into the studio. It's like,
it's something
guys, but like, you just made this. So anyway, but it's like always, it's always a problem. And I think the bigger like underlying problem is actually, what are we going to do in like 150 years? You know, like, are we making content that even matters for 150 years from now?
Right.
And on top of it, will any of these codecs survive? There's different flavors of every one. Like, you would have to write such an enormous protocol to try to open all the formats that we've got at this point. So like raw formats are going to probably be the easiest, but H.265 and certain flavors of H.264, like it's remains to be seen, you know?
Well, there's certainly, you know, like VLC and are you a PC or a Mac guy?
I'm definitely a Mac guy, but I have dabbled.
Sure. So I've just noticed with PC, it's a little bit easier to just like shove a ton of codecs in there. And there's a program called Media Player Classic, and then obviously VLC, which kind of can just open anything.
Right.
But that does bring up that question of like I just was going through, I moved into a new office, and I finally have an office, and I found an old drive that was FireWire.
Oh yeah.
I don't have any FireWire cards. Like, good luck getting anything off that, you know?
Right.
It's probably got a bunch of DV on it, which I found the tapes, I got to go find my XL2 and use that as a deck. And like, it does bring up a good question. Like, I'm a big legacy media guy, and judging by the beard, you can probably tell I own records. And, but you know, like Blu-rays, like people are already talking about the death of Blu-ray. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's the best format we've had.
Right.
But is it going to go the way of like the Star Wars Laserdiscs, you know, where no one can get a hold of those, and that's like the holy grail of that trilogy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the highest quality thing for a very long time. It was like the SR-71 Blackbird of the video world.
Have you read Sled Driver?
Oh,
buddy, if you're into anything military at all, but especially the Blackbird, there's one of the pilots wrote a book called Sled Driver. It's about that thick, but you can kind of find a PDF if you sail the high seas, as it were.
Sure.
You mentioned two thoughts. One, you had mentioned the difference between commercial work and something else, and that had reminded me, similarly talking about the technology. What is it about the Alexa? Because I noticed, I was looking at your website, you shot a lot of Alexa on the Leica R's and the Super Speeds. So A, what do you like about those Leica R's? But B, the difference between Red and Alexa. What is it about the Alexa that looks the way it does? Because on your on Haunted Swordsman, I've noticed a lot of like that really beautiful yellow and blue, and I feel like you can always get that with Alexa. Or is that more coloring?
That's actually a good question. Well, so to answer the first question, the Leica R's,
there's the ranting that I was talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, it's only two. I have good enough memory for two at least. The Leica R's are actually something I just invested in myself. I actually bought them from a guy named Stephen Gelb, who owns Lensworks. Before he had really gotten himself up and running, he was selling Leica R sets. And so I started with a core set that he sold me, and I was super excited and jazzed about it because I really liked the look of them. Because I think if you can get a relatively matched set that's a little bit older, they have a sort of patina to them, but also the flares are a little bit softer, but have this interesting little corona thing that happens with them depending on the focal length. they're just beautiful lenses. And they've always been my standby when there's not enough money to get nicer lenses.
Sure.
It was a significant, it's like maybe $8,000 or $9,000 to get into it, but there were so many focal lengths versus say like the contacts lenses, which are a little bit, they're definitely a really nice look, but there just aren't that many focal lengths.
Right.
So I bought the Leica R's as a way to ensure that I wouldn't have to get rid of a camera in order to do the job. You know, if I needed to have like a lens or whatever, like I wouldn't have to spend all this money rental wise on getting the right lens and then have to get a camera that I didn't like, for instance. So that's why the Leica R's have shown up so much. And it's always been good luck for me when directors see those that are actually very visually attuned and into the gear, when they see the Leica R's and they go, oh man, I love the Leica R's. I don't know, maybe it's a blessing and a curse to actually mention it on my website. For some people who are gearheads, it's like a thing that becomes a point of interest, and it can be a good thing or a bad thing. But at the same time, it sort of ties me to like, yeah, like maybe you could tell I didn't have the money, so I went with that particular lens or whatever, you know. It may open people to judgment of it, but ultimately it's like, well, I think it's interesting to have it there to note that, like, yeah, if this particular look, for anyone who's trying to figure out what look I was doing, then yeah, maybe it's helpful. And I am definitely a huge advocate of education. And I feel like that's my job ultimately. Like, I mean, sure, the execution of what we're doing is this film, but that ultimately, if somebody doesn't know something, maybe I can help. Or if they want to know something. I went to AFI, and one of the main tenets of being at AFI is that you really do, in your communication with directors and producers and everyone, is help educate. That's the whole point. I think I got a real healthy dose of that when we started our drone company, because there's a lot of rules to navigate and it can be frustrating if you don't know them. So a calm explanation of how it all interweaves is really helpful for a production. So anyway, I'm a huge advocate of being able to teach, and hopefully I don't overstay my welcome in that way usually. But in answering your other question, why an Alexa might have a different look than a Red, I have a theory, because I don't think that there is a lot of information on what exactly is happening inside the Red. This one is tough because I have been contacted by Red recently, and they're very excited that we shot users on the Red Gemini.
Right.
And I feel like it's the first of their cameras that I've worked with that had a pretty high quality color reproduction on it. I feel like the Monstro and the Helium were not quite doing the job. And my theory behind all that, you know, if you exclude, for instance, noise and noise patterns and all of that are associated with those cameras, my feeling is that the effort to create smaller and smaller photo sites to create a higher and higher resolution image, you end up with two physical problems. One of them is that if your photo site can't be large enough, there's more noise than there is signal when you get into the dark, because it's the number of photons that hits the photo site that decides how much signal there is. So the smaller your photo site, the less light you can accept.
Right.
And actually affect the diode by which it changes the voltage. So if you're going for 8K and you have to make your photo site too small, which is partly why I think they had to compromise and actually enlarge the sensor size in order to pull this off. You're just going to end up with more noise. I think also there was a tradition in camera making probably 10 years ago where your image was super sampled from the sensor. And that was pretty much given up, I think, by Red. I think the quest to say 4K, 5K, 6K, 7K, 8K was essentially achieved by using some fuzzy math in order to recreate the data that isn't actually there.
Right.
Whereas, for instance, there's this amazing short film shot by this guy who goes by the name McGregor, The Backbone of the Sahara. This is an amazing short film that we actually use as a reference, or at least I tried to use as a reference for users. He shot that on the F-35, and that was like one of the, it's beautiful. It's an HD camera, but it's using a 4K sensor super sampled down. And what happens when you super sample is you're actually getting a larger amount, because of the Bayer pattern, a larger amount of color information. So I think that essentially with cameras that are designed to utilize the super sampling more efficiently, you get more nuanced color. And when you actually go into the coloring room, you can create natural changes in color because you have more color resolution. And all of these things are essentially happening inside of a container. So you could have a 16-bit file, but if the source of it is not really 16-bit worthy, then you're not really doing much, but giving somebody a lot of replicated or synthesized data.
Right.
I don't know if that's too techie, but I would say that this in itself is why I have a huge respect for Arri, because I feel like they couldn't figure out how to do anything more than what they do, which is to super sample and to try to give the best color science that they can. And I feel like it slows their whole innovation process down quite a bit. And so they don't output that many cameras. It's starting to change, but they definitely do it very slowly. And I, for one, as a cinematographer, really appreciate that. And watching Red release the Gemini, I was surprised by their pricing structure, because ultimately, sure, you can't quantify that 5K is somehow better than the 8K Monstro, but ultimately the image that they produce on that one, I think, is actually quite significantly better and has less noise. So that was exactly why we chose it for our documentary.
Yeah, I was really excited when the Gemini came out. I was a big Dragon fan. I'm with you. I didn't like the cameras in the middle, but I thought the Dragon looked really cool. And my friend who uses Red all the time, he's still down with the Epic, the original MX sensor. He thinks is their best. Although, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, there is I don't know if this is hearsay or what, but there was that one guy who had like a whole vendetta against Red and made like a little YouTube series of like 5-hour-long videos.
Oh, wow.
His theory, well, because he made off-brand Red mags and then got sued because because they're just regular SSDs with like a little adapter.
Right.
He was like, forget this, I'm going to make my own. So then they sued him. So then he went on the warpath. And his theory is that it's been the same sensor this whole time, and it's just been the firmware that they've been adjusting in the processing.
Right. That wouldn't surprise me, to be honest, because I think that the hardware itself is really hard to make. The sensors are hard to make, and only a few companies can really pull off such a specialized thing. I mean, Sony really runs the market. If you look at
everyone's sensor.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think even most Panasonics are Sony sensors. And I might be wrong on that, but I know, for instance, like DJI, all of theirs
Most
are
cell
Sony.
phones.
Right. That's true. Um, the interesting thing that I learned, and this is totally aside, is that Sony does the same kind of thing that any of those consumer brand companies do to their customers. So, for instance, DJI has the option, for instance, when you buy the Inspire 2, you can get a version that can do it can output RAW, it can output ProRes, but you have to pay for that, right? It's
Right.
already built into the system's hardware, but you have to unlock it, just like you would RAW or anamorphic settings on the Alexa Mini, for instance. So it's already there, but it's just access that you're buying. Sony does that with their sensors too when they sell them to companies that create products around their sensors. So, for instance, DJI has to buy the rights. They can have like as much access to that sensor as they want, but they have to pay more per license, that they do. So I always think that's kind of fascinating that it's not a grift, but it's like that pricing structure concept is all the way to business end of it, where everybody's just like doing it to each other,
And I suppose, like, to a certain degree, you gotta. I mean, if they're making fucking everybody's sensors, like, yeah, you probably need a lot of extra cash to make it, and especially the different sizes. Have you been shooting a full frame at all? Now that all these, like, the LF and the 500 here and the FX9 and all that are out, and the Venice.
Well, actually, that actually tips me off to a point about the dock users, because we were actually planning to shoot on large frame, because in a way we were doing an homage to Baraka or Koyaanisqatsi, in the sense that they were sort of formal fine art movies as much as they were a music video that's a travelogue. It's obviously way more than that, but that ultimately they're fine art pieces. What was his name? Ron Fricke is a large format cinematographer. That's what he's known for, like IMAX and 65 millimeter and things like that. And so looking towards that, we were like, well, what camera can we work with? And we had a company in Mexico City named Simplemente that Natalia, the director, had worked with on previous projects. And I had worked with them a little bit through Natalia. They offered us a whole bevy of cameras to just keep for the 2 years, or we didn't know how long it was going to be, but they were just going to give us cameras for as long as we needed it to shoot the dock, that's huge privilege.
Insane, yeah.
Especially for these level of cameras, because Monica at Simplemente was offering us a full-size LF, a Monstro, a Helium, and a Gemini. And in the end, I thought, well, the way I've built my career, somehow I'm going to go onto a gimbal, or I'm going to rig something. And that LF being 28 volt and being like almost 18 pounds just for the body.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes not even having an AC, I don't think that's going to be the way we want to go. So we went towards smaller, and I was like, well, then the Monstro is the next option. And I started comparing the Monstro with the Helium and the Gemini, and I could see the noise was very different between all of them. And I realized that I'd rather something less noisy. So the Gemini sort of fell right into that spot. And I thought, well, they still want this big frame feel, so I may have to do the thing that a lot of DPs do, which is just go wide open on a really nice lens.
Yeah.
And the Master Primes were like the first choice. And I showed a few different options to Natalia. I think we went through maybe 8 or 10 options of lenses that would be good and viable. but I really wanted her to go for the master primes because I'd shot with them once and I thought, oh my God, it's like, would I ever be so lucky as to use these again? They just are, there's something about them that is magical. And she chose the master primes. And I was like, well, okay. Hopefully we can get everything we want with this set of lenses. But every time we would rent anything, because we didn't buy them, we would rent only 3 lenses every shoot. And that was it. We would always have like a 35 as our mainstay. And then we started with a 75 and an 18. And then eventually it would just shift around according to the shoot. But pretty much 35 and then eventually the 100 macro was like everything for that film.
Well, because the large format thing, going back to the idea of like how
Right.
people are just jamming photo sites onto, Super 35 sensors. I did a comparison of the C500 Mark II and the C300 Mark III for review on ProVideo. Mm-hmm. And while the C300 had the DGO sort of Alexa-like processing, everyone was like, oh, it's better in low light. And I was like, no, it has a lower noise floor. But actually, when you crank up the ISO, the noise is way worse than the C500 because there's the bigger sensor, smaller noise pattern. You can correct it out way easier.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was just kind of wondering if you would experience that kind of thing.
I haven't used any. I've seen. Oh, I guess I did shoot with the Venice a couple times, and the Venice is nice actually. I like it a lot.
I like it.
It's a whole. I think large frame is kind of a different way of thinking. I just feel like it's just focal length that I have to get used to, but that ultimately. I don't usually see a lot of the difference unless I'm looking at a larger screen.
Yeah. Or you're in like the grade. It's really like it's just for me, like I've talked about this before. It doesn't change. Like you said, it changes the way you choose lenses, but it's just like higher detail if it's done right. Other than that, it's no one's going to notice. It's not like your image then suddenly becomes more cinematic, which I hate that term, and I'm throwing it in big old air quotes. I think that term came from the 5D. When the 5D came out and we were all shooting on, half-inch chips or micro four thirds, like that AF100 that came out. I had one of those. We suddenly had control of our depth of field without those wild adapters. Remember, like the Red Rock and the Lettuce and all that.
Oh yeah.
So I think that term that like, tell me if you found this, the beginning of the internet sort of when it became, let's say 2008 seems to be the time in which all knowledge stopped. Like everyone's basis for cinematography and many, many other things, but we'll just keep it on topic, seems to come from there to now. And if you pick up one issue of ASC, you've already learned 70% more than everyone else seems to be repeating. It's this like someone finds one thing and then repeats it over and over, and then that becomes the truth.
Right. I'm sure my dad would love to hear you say that. I'll let you look him up to get a sense of context to that. But I do agree. I think that because there's a lot of incentive to echo everyone else in order to have content. I think that, that you're probably right, that everything becomes an echo chamber when you can disperse it so heavily for your own benefit. But I agree. I mean, ASC or AC magazine is like enough to give you so much information right off the bat. And I think it's funny because I think that the process by which we understand our exposure has changed so dramatically.
That was going to be my next question. So write it out.
I feel like in learning how to shoot film, like when I was interviewed to go to AFI, I was told in the interview that, or they actually, it was a bit of a leading question. They asked me, do I think that learning film is important at film school. And I said, I think it is important for discipline, but I recognize that by the time I get out of film school, which would have been around 2014, that we probably won't be generally on film anymore, and that the digital process is equally as important as far as applicably what I'm going to be working in. They were very unhappy to hear that, of course. I still got in, thankfully, but I know that was a rough spot in my interview. I feel like growing up in the film era, because I started as a loader in like 2000 on a movie with Kramer Morgenthau in the Camp Pendleton Marine Base. It was such a crazy movie. Forrest Whitaker and Patrick Swayze in this movie. It was such a weird, but it was mostly in Vietnamese. So yeah, it's pretty amazing experience, I can tell you. Yeah. But I've been through the film universe, at least from that era on, and I watched us change over to HD, and it was really confusing for a lot of people. I grew up with video, and so walking into the film universe seemed like, oh, that's what professional is, and video will never be a thing, even though I know it so well. I mean, I was using, Premiere 1.0 to try to sync my audio because I couldn't get a big enough video card to work, when I was in high school or whatever. So I would just use it for audio, like Pro Tools or something.
I was using Sony Vegas for the same thing.
Really? Oh yeah, I remember that. I never used Vegas because I didn't know how to get it, essentially.
You could find it, That's pretty much why a lot of kids, even today, it's just one of those ones that's a little easy to install, let's say.
Right.
But it started off as an audio editor. So right. I was doing mashups, like back in the day when mashups were really cool. I was doing those all in Vegas.
Right. I mean, I think this is all the more reason to say that the internet initially was going to be so democratizing.
Yeah. And then it led to sameness.
Yeah. Oddly enough, it seems like usually the powers that be find a way to throttle the uniqueness.
Yeah. Or at least make them unmarketable.
Right. And that is usually the problem, right? Is that in capitalism, we can't just fund people on coming up with wacky ideas. It's like it somehow has to pay off.
That was a conversation I was having with another DP on an earlier episode, which was the 70s when they decided, like, you know what, let's just give directors some cash and be like, go.
Right.
Like, ended up being the best time in film, followed closely by the latter half of the 90s when technology made everything more accessible, and they were just like, yeah, you with your wacky ideas, we don't even get it, go.
Right.
And now everything's very controlled.
There seems to be a bit of a wow and flutter to it, right? Like I think for a very long time when distribution channels became pretty narrow and there was a lot of conglomeration of media companies, I think that exact thing was happening. And I think as we've gone to streaming, it's broken up a bit of that orthodoxy in what you can make because more people are making those decisions. It seems like Netflix and Hulu and Disney, they're all opening things up again and taking a few more risks. But it seems that ultimately, if we follow the same pattern that seems to always happen, that will all conglomerate one more time and we'll go into a much more rigid understanding of how to just make the money. And that's might be the more important thing. But as far as film and digital is concerned, I feel like it's even though it is complicated in the digital universe compared to understanding just density and whatnot with a light meter, I think that it really allows people to learn so fast and create, because a lot of the math and science is operating in the machine itself. I think that because of the instant feedback, you're learning a pre-cut way of how the camera works so fast, because it's a lot of it, just like a film stock, for instance, a lot of the look of your camera is ultimately deciding certain things. And so learning the deep innards of your camera is hard to do. So you kind of end up just doing a lot of the same. I think that when true visual innovation occurs, it's like gold, and people go nuts over it. And there was an interesting podcast conversation that I heard with, and I may be butchering his name. I feel really bad if I do, because I love his work. Khalid Motaseb.
Couldn't tell you.
He's a commercial cinematographer. He was talking on a podcast about the person, the interviewer was asking him, like, so you pretty much did this whole slash eye light thing, before anybody, and now everybody's doing it. And he, like, right away was like, well, I wasn't the first one to do that particular thing. But the point that she was even making about it is like, yeah, this idea that that an image, a way to communicate through an image in a particular way becomes that innovation. I probably should put it a different way. When somebody discovers a way to communicate a certain feeling or tone by doing something in your photograph with it, whether it be lighting or something with the iris, or a combination of all of the things together, somebody innovates that once and a million people use it as a reference.
Right.
And then that you see nothing but proliferation of that. And you watch these trends as they happen. They play out like clockwork now because of the proliferation. And it really does bring down the uniqueness and increases, like you said, the sameness. I'm co-opting what you were saying, but ultimately I do feel like there is a sameness that's created. And I think, like any good writing, good photography usually hurts just a little bit. If you really want to change and do something new, it's going to be a really awkward and uncomfortable creative situation to be in, because you don't quite know. I find that as I've become more experienced as a DP, it's the only thing that has kept me from nervous breakdowns is having prior experience that allows me to say, if all else fails, I know where I got to put a light. I know where I have to put the camera and what kind of lens in order to get the general vibe of what I'm doing.
A baseline.
Right. And I think that that's easily relied upon. And because it's an industry and this isn't just art, there's a tendency for most of us to fall back on that when we have to make money, because we need some guarantees, just like we need some money. And I think that the most important thing that I've learned from the last few years is that it's okay to have uncomfortable situations if you're feeling conviction that you can get something that is so specific to your photographic situation, that truly communicates what you need to communicate, and maybe hasn't been communicated or hasn't been put in this context or whatever. You may find yourself becoming Chivo for like a minute, where you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing that redefines how I do things. And suddenly other people see it and it clicks so well for them that they want that for themselves.
Yeah. It's hard to find a way to express yourself without knowing the various ways that one can express themselves, right? Like if you know how to hum, but if you don't know how to pick up a guitar, you don't know the notes, you'll struggle to get what you want out. And that friction I think can stop a lot of people from amazing things, whether it be music or visually or whatever, any amount. I mean, fuck, man, I have to like design my office in a certain way so that like pencils are really close. Cause like I won't take notes if I have to stand up, you know, like anything. If not being able to just grab something, what Adam Savage calls first order retrievability. Right. If I don't have that, I don't do it. You know,
it's over. Right. Yeah, I'm a similar way. I think even sometimes on set, I'm usually more inspired in the moment than I am in the planning. But I can plan the hell out of things because I do 3D. Sometimes I pre-light in 3D and all sorts of things in order to get there, you know? Anyway, sorry.
To that note about a baseline, what for the education, what kind of lighting are you drawn to on like a baseline? Like how do you, and secondarily, like how do you expose digital as opposed to film, and like what things are you watching out for? But like, especially with your lighting, how have you approached it for like someone who's trying to just do a bread and butter job and make it look good and get out of there? It's not, you know, we're not changing the world. We're selling soap, you know?
Right. I think what has occurred to me in the past few years is that 3-point lighting is literally not a thing.
Yep.
And that when I was in film school originally, that was a concept, at least, that was taught. And I don't think we ever quite moved past that. Lighting is tough to teach because it's really about intangible things like feelings and tone, and it's open to creativity. So I think it's hard for a lot of people to innovate. For me, I guess when I look at my baseline, I think of things that have always added a certain gloss or a certain have added to a certain level of giving me the full range of things in contrast and color. So there's always this thing in the back of my head where I wonder, can I top light? Can I top fill? Because if I can, someone will be happy with that. I know for sure. If I do, if I'm going to add any sort of fill or wrap onto someone, I'm going to make sure that it's the softest thing in the room, and sometimes doesn't even have a light, that it could just be as simple as bringing a beadboard in.
Yeah.
Because ultimately people's faces they just need much less harshness to them in order to actually feel less lit. And I think that my baseline is always to try to figure out how to get much more natural so that you don't really think about it as much. And let the colors maybe do the work ultimately.
Like production design or like color contrast with white balance?
I would say color contrast of sources that are moving in a room. I think that oftentimes it's more important to me to know that perhaps a face is a little bit warmer or more face tone, and whatever is hitting them from behind is a little bit cooler. For instance, you've got a slightly warmer light on your face right now, and the sunlight or the
sun,
blue.
I was going to say the sun moved behind a building or something, so now I'm looking very lit. This is not natural at all.
I mean, I think at the same time, though, the nice thing about it is at least the quality of the light that's hitting you from back there is like perfect. That's the kind of thing that's understated and feels like when you're looking at somebody in a conversation, it feels right. You know? Yeah. And in this case, it is natural. So of course it's perfect.
Yeah.
But I would say like, my friend, Ed Wu and I used to joke all the time in film school that, when in doubt, if you can't figure out what to do, you can just go ahead and silhouette it. then you're going to be probably just fine. It's moody enough. It'll give you what you need. But that's not necessarily, I can't really think of many times when I've done that. So I would say that's my last, that's like when I'm at, DEFCON 1 and things are bad. And it's like, all right, I've at least got something like that in my back pocket.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up top lighting because I wonder where that top light has existed since forever, but it does seem, I'm wondering if it's like the light mat or what technology made it, maybe Kinos, because we're doing it a lot now. Like top light is fill if we had to use 3-point lighting, as a thing, and that just seems to be the thing. And I love it. When I sort of realized that was the thing that I liked, I was like, oh, I'm putting that on everything.
Right. I think that there's two facts to it that I think people are comfortable with, that's just psychologically comfortable with. One of them, you can basically say, sure, like the original lighting, like how we walk around throughout the day, there is always a top fill. The sun could be wherever, but we always have some kind of top fill. And I think that our eyes are designed to feel comfortable in that. Because that is the most natural state. I mean, it's why every camera manufacturer wants to shoot tests for their camera during like sunlight at, the end of the day, when the sun is just low enough to give proper sculpting on somebody, but you also have this nice top fill that's always happening. And I think the other fact is, before we had lights that were powerful enough, that was how people lit it anyway. If you were inside, studios used to just open up the top, and that was how people lit it originally. And that in itself just makes the most sense. It's the most natural way that we see the pattern of the human face. And I think, it has its obvious advantages. It's like Gordon Willis figured it out obviously pretty quickly. And I think the way you can control light in a room to allow the ambience to still exist while not necessarily having to have lights coming from every perfect direction to, squeeze people in, pretty much set with a top fill.
Yeah.
And that I think is the way to think more often anyway, when lighting, is that if the space is the way you want it, it's not necessarily about the little moment when the person walks into the right spot. That's more the accent than anything else. But the space itself being lit the way you want it to fit the tone is exactly how you communicate in lighting, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I think I interrupted you before I let you get to the point about exposing film versus digital, because I still shoot film photography and I learned on 16 mil, but at the time I was on shooting 16, I didn't have enough institutional knowledge. I hadn't worked long enough to really get it. I was shooting it like I was shooting mini DV or like VHS,
Right.
Because digital seems like you don't need as much light. It seems way more sensitive. Is it just a matter of bringing in a lot more neg, or like how do you conceptualize that, or like even expose for a sensor?
Right. I think in general, if I haven't done already some kind of, I guess, what do we call those now? They're not density tests because that was film. What do you call it now? I guess a dynamic range test.
Yeah.
I think now, if I haven't done a dynamic range test on a camera, I generally know if the camera is going to be able to record a latitude that's over like 12 stops. And ultimately, film is kind of in that zone of 12 stops, but reacts more powerfully when overexposed. Whereas the digital side of it can work generally a little bit better when it's underexposed, because ultimately you're not dealing with a negative in the process. That'd be my simplest explanation, but I don't know if that's so basic that everybody already knows that.
Right. Well, and I think that it'd be important for certain people listening, like underexposed meaning not as hot as you would shoot film, not underlit.
Right. Right.
Like
exactly.
Your ratios are probably more in a 3-to-1 kind of thing instead of like an 8-to-1 or
right.
Well, and I guess it depends on what kind of ratios you're talking. That always confused me. Like I always thought of it was in stops, and then people were like, "No, it's some other math." It's like, right. I don't want to learn math. Tell me in stops.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's voltage and there's code values and all that stuff. Yeah. One interesting thing that did happen to me in coloring for users, this was a very different experience for me. I shot a series last summer called Kinderfanger for Crypt TV.
That trailer looked cool.
Oh, thanks. It was super exciting for me to do this for two reasons. One, the director is a good friend of mine and a good DP. And so being able to work with somebody so visual was such a kick in the pants. I was so happy to just be able to rap back and forth with him. And oftentimes, because he had to kind of let me do my own thing, because he had to obviously work with the actors too, it gave me a chance to try to impress him as much as I could. And that became, underneath it all, like that was the gratification I was going for. It was like, this person who appreciates visuals too, like I can't wait to make something that maybe just piques their interest even a little bit, because I know he's seen so much. Yeah. The other thing that was really powerful about working on that project was the main actress is deaf. And I am the child of deaf parents. And so this was like catharsis for me to make a movie, even if it was just a horror movie, or a horror series that, probably a good number of people saw, but it's just the catharsis of being able to tell a story of a deaf person.
Yeah.
I think that was super powerful. I mean, I probably wouldn't admit this in public, and I don't know why I'm admitting it now, but I can tell you on our wrap morning, because we had worked all night, I don't know if it was the sleep or, the lack of sleep or the stress that was finally getting relieved, but I had a big, long conversation with Angel, the actress, and I think I was like almost sobbing in front of my crew. I was like, oh, this is embarrassing. Like somehow I feel like she kind of gave me the freedom to have my feelings about my parents and growing up with them. So that was a big deal for me. But
that's awesome.
What's that?
That's awesome.
It's funny actually, because Coda is a movie that came out at Sundance this year that was about child of deaf adults, and I've connected a bit with the director of that. I kind of can't believe it. That movie swept, which I don't think normally happens at Sundance. She got the best director, best feature, best writer. She got like 3 or 4 awards, something like that.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. It's definitely worth checking out. But the post process on Kinderfanger was COVID friendly. So I was having to be in a separate room from the colorist, which was not so bad. That was a tolerable experience for sure. They were very good colorists. Users, we were doing something very different. They were, our color and post onlining facility was in Mexico City. And they calibrated a Flanders 35 inch that was prepared for 1000 nit HDR, because we were doing Dolby Vision first. They sent us their calibrated one that was calibrated next to theirs, and we shared and did a remote grade and resolve from Mexico City to San Francisco in this special room that Natalia and our producer Olivia built. They didn't even want me to get involved. They were like, "We just want to surprise you." I was like, "Okay."
Sick.
So I showed up, and I have to say I was very impressed. I thought,
"Oh, good.
This is exactly like the whole room is properly blacked out, and it was great. The whole setup was really nice." But I can definitely tell you, I can't wait to be done with COVID, because remote grading is the very worst experience. And it's not so much the team that did it. It was just more to get proper results to do what we were doing. It was a really it was a perfect storm of doing HDR for the first time. So Natalia didn't quite know what to expect, and I had a little bit of a naive understanding of how it was going to work as well. But you run through the process where you do HDR in BT 2184 color space,
right?
And you set everything to 1,000 nits, and then we do it all in ACES, and the ACES color transform. And once you're done with that, then you Dolby gives you this piece of software that's part of your color tab in Resolve that allows you to do colored trims, where essentially their software analyzes your HDR and then creates an SDR version, and then you make manual adjustments according to what you think is right. But the manual adjustments, it almost feels like old like panels or paddles for like doing like, printer lights or something. It's pretty straightforward and simple. You can do primaries and secondaries and all that stuff, but it's not quite nuanced in any major way. But the analysis in theory is supposed to take care of the lion's share of the work of getting it to go from HDR to SDR. The problem is, at the moment, there's no way to do that remote. So we can't watch it live as it gets changed. They would have to do it. We'd have to trust them. And then they would send us, or they would put on their hard drive that we could access through an FTP server, basically, a full rendered version. So we'd have to download that for like 8 hours or something.
Right.
And so we'd have to make notes on the whole thing, hope that those tiny little, little too magenta here, a little too green there, could get translated through their eyes as well. And then they would put it on the hard drive, and then 8 hours later, we could take a look at it. So it would take like a whole day to get feedback.
Yeah, I'm currently coloring a documentary and then a short, not a short feature. What the hell am I talking about? Just an indie feature. But the indie feature was shot on a Z cam in 709. So I'm really just kind of balancing it than anything.
Like it was a burned in 709 look?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Was that an accident or on purpose?
I didn't ask. They just said that's what it was, and I wasn't about to be like, well, you should have done it. They're at picture lock, so what am I going to do,
I mean, it sounds like they're almost at color lock too.
Yeah. I'm just going to make some things match. They're kind of aiming for like a film look, so doing a little bit of that like grain and color manipulation, kind of squeezing everything and whatever. But
gotcha.
Yeah, for the documentary that I've been working on, multiple cameras, it was shot on a C100. So not a ton of room to manipulate anything, that 8-bit 420.
Right.
But the notes, like I just have to send them like a 720, because who the hell wants to download a 20 gig, 40 gig file for an hour and a half?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like a 720 sort of screener, and then he just has to manually type notes into an email. Although there's stuff like Evercast, but then I don't know if their stuff is calibrated. We learned 4 rounds of notes in that he was watching on QuickTime and not VLC, which I thought I had suggested, but I may not have. And so he was giving me all these notes like, it's not it's too saturated, or it's not contrasty enough. Now it's too contrasty. And I'm like, and then at one point I was like, are you watching on QuickTime? And he goes, yeah, why? And I was like, fuck.
Oh my God. Yes. That exact thing happened to us, where they had sent the monitor to us from Mexico set to 100 nits instead of 1,000 nits.
Mm.
And Natalia was like, "Oh, I think it looks okay." And I'm like, "It's looking so dim. Like, it looks murky. Like, this can't be the way this movie looks."
Right.
It took us 3 days of coloring before they were like, "Can you do us a favor and just change on the monitor?" I was like, "Okay." I changed it to 1,000. I was like, "Ah, oh my God, it looks so good." That changed everything. But what's funny though is right after that experience, like after we finished all the posts on users, I had shot a short film called Love in Brooklyn for this guy who I really liked working with. He was like, we did literally no lighting on the whole thing. And yet still I was like, this actually looks really good. And on my FS7, which was a surprisingly good combo somehow.
Were you gripping at all, or was it literally just angles and location?
It was mostly just, angles and location, time of day. And we shot like a 12-page thing in one day.
Wow.
Didn't go too late. I think we went 13 hours or something. The actors somehow had all the dialogue dialed in. Like they were really good. It was fantastic. It was a very inspiring experience. And then we got to the point recently, because that was shot about a year and a half ago. Recently, I had the opportunity to use the same coloring system. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just try to do that real quick and just spend a day or two coloring it for him. So I went through, did an initial pass, showed it to him, and he was like, "This is horrible, man." I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Crap, I just spent all night working on this." I was like, "Okay, well," and he was very specific, and he has a very good visual sense. Like he's a photographer as well. Definitely, I think he's a really good photographer.
Yeah.
But in the process of trying to figure out, because I knew, what were we going to be able to do? He doesn't have a calibrated monitor on his end, and things are looking fantastic on this $35,000 Flanders.
Right.
How do I translate that? I can't just say, "Oh, trust me, it looks great," because every time I would upload it to Vimeo, it would change. And so this was the problem. This was one of my main problems, was that I even bothered with Vimeo for color checking and contrast checking, because their compression definitely adds contrast and shifts colors just slightly. And that's nothing against Vimeo at all. I love Vimeo. But I think as a color checker, it was not a great way to go. And I learned pretty quickly, like, I don't think there's any way I'm going to be able to communicate what I'm doing to him, and he's not going to be able to see what it is that I'm doing properly.
Right.
And it was frustrating, to be honest. He ended up just coloring it himself because, he has the proper reference on his end. He did it in Final Cut Pro. I think he did a good job. I think maybe this is, if directing doesn't work for him.
Yeah, just color
could work out,
That was actually a question that the team I was talking to earlier, they did Searchers, which for a second there I didn't know who I was talking to, because Searchers and Users, I was like, wait, hold on, which one do I have to watch? But they were both curious as to, so I'll just ask you, because I hadn't asked anyone else, and it's stupid on my part. Sundance being virtual this year, how do you color for that? Or how, obviously you don't shoot for this, but how do you prep that for display when you have no clue who's watching it on what?
Well, I think the only thing you can do, and I think this is the general idea behind color anyway. The only thing you can really do is find the best monitor you can to give you the most accurate representation of the data that you've got. Make that look as good as you can. And then once you release it to the world, there's not a lot you can do.
Because they were talking about doing the whole the music production thing of like chucking the tape in the car and driving it around to see what it sounds like out in the world. Like getting a iPad, watching it on the iPad, doing a quick trim, trying to find that balance between what is it, quote unquote, objectively perfect and what is likely to be seen.
Right.
Like
we ended up just looking at it on our laptops for the most part. which is probably pretty good, in general, if your laptop screen is calibrated, to 709 and all of that. So,
quick plug for Acer. I calibrated this monitor on my laptop.
Uh-huh.
Very minor adjustments that Display Cal had to make. It was actually pretty accurate out of the box.
And that's not because it doesn't have the choice to do certain levels of like discrete detail, or do you think it's just they just nailed it basically?
I think they, who knows what it's like a 120 hertz panel and whatever. I think panels are just getting nicer, but yeah, using the i1 display and Display Cal, it kind of just did its automatic ICC profile, and it wasn't a giant. It was a noticeable shift, but it wasn't a giant one.
Huh.
So I think even because this is like their their Predator system and whatever, but I think displays are getting nicer even outside of the Apple ecosystem, which we all know is pretty nice.
Right. Yeah.
But also less unified.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in general, I feel like what's interesting is that we were actually our Resolve machine in San Francisco that we were doing the color for users was somewhat prototype new Mac Pro. It had some special quad GPU thing in it. But we had that XR monitor. I think it's called the XR monitor.
Yeah, the XDR.
XDR.
Extreme Dynamic Range, I think.
Oh, that's what it is. It looks amazing, but it runs best in P3. So it was really confusing at times when we would look at things on that versus our proper monitor. But Resolve also, I don't suggest to anyone to run Resolve without a monitor that's got some kind of SDI or HDMI output proper, because of the way it operates on a monitor, like a laptop monitor, for instance.
I did buy a new full frame zoom. I've shot everything on the 18 to 35, the Sigma.
Right.
Love that lens, like literally everything for 5 years. And
then,
when I went to full frame, I was like, oh shit, I got to find a new,
a
new everyday zoom,
Right.
Because I shoot on a Nikon F2, I already had a set of those Nikkor primes. So I just 3D printed some lens gears and stuck them on. They're not all the same size, which might take me a little more effort to how they'll like Duclos will make the ones where you can just leave the gear and they're all the, the problem with those Nikkors, which I love them, but they're very, very thin. So you can't really get it needs a focus motor. You can't get a handheld one. It gets too close to the camera body.
Like the arm from the follow focus can't reach far enough.
Yeah.
That's a pretty typical problem, right? Because those are the old school ones. It's like the housings are it's like so nice. They're so tiny.
Yeah.
It's so slim, and yet doesn't quite work for cinema, I guess, in that way.
Yeah. So I'll have to fucking find some way to wrap this up.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me know what would work best for you, and I'm definitely going to send you all this stuff
for sure.
So any which way you want to do it. There's about 1,000 more topics you and I could easily probably rap about. Obviously, I think you and I have like a gear fascination thing that I could probably I was literally about to go into like 10 minutes about the Sigma 18 to 35.
Would you like to? Because I'll clip that and put it on something.
I mean, I think what's fascinating about the Sigma actually, the Sigma art lenses, I can't even remember who introduced me to them. It was probably like 5 years ago or whenever they first came out, somebody mentioned them and I said, well, the fact that art is in the name is kind of lame. So I was a little skeptical. And then I used one and thought, oh yeah, this is like weirdly cinematic compared to most other lenses that I've used, because it's a zoom that's faster than a 2, at least f-stop wise, and the focus roll off is really severe. You really feel it when it's out of focus versus when it's in focus, and it's pretty sharp, and your flares are unique. Like
And it
almost.
doesn't really breathe either.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't really breathe. I don't even think that the cinema version does much breathing at all.
No, the 50 to 100 does, but the 18 to 35 is pretty
Right.
locked in.
I actually went in whole hog and got the 50 to 100 as well, because I was like, oh yeah, if I'm going to start shooting stuff super fast, quick and dirty, I need to have that second one. I can't tell you how often though I've just been wondering, I wish I could just have a 40. It's like it's that one in between that you can't have with that.
I bought the Canon 40 pancake.
Oh really?
It looks ridiculous on the C500.
Oh, I'm sure.
It looks like a lens cap.
Right.
Or like a body cap.
Yeah. I mean, the Sigmas are fascinating also because I know they have some of these spherical elements in them, but the majority of their lenses are actually still old, manually hand ground. Like they don't get very sophisticated, and that's how apparently they keep it inexpensive. Maybe the Master Primes have maybe a flatness that's a little bit different.
The Master Primes definitely compose an image in like a very
It's
I think
super
flatness is
rectilinear.
his word.
Yeah, it's like 100% rectilinear.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I really noticed some interesting things shooting users with them, because when you go wide open on them, the myth of it, the lore of it is that it's exactly the same. It's not really. It actually does some really pretty things. Your bokeh kind of goes almond shaped on the edges and things like that. I think it's there's just so many things about those lenses that I don't even know what to say. Like skin renders really nicely if you have the right lights. It has this really smooth roll off. Flares are kind of pastel-y. It's just like, I don't know. It's just pure cinema. I haven't seen any lenses as good as that, or like that have that kind of perfection yet character built into them. Even the signature primes, really.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going full character like Cooke S4s or.
Right.
Although I suppose what's the one that Fincher uses all the time, the Leica Sumoluxes.
Yeah.
Apparently those are pretty neutral.
They're extremely neutral looking. I used them on the Kinderfinger thing because the director Bridger actually owns a set.
Oh, nice.
Not even Summicrons. We had Sumoluxes.
Right.
It was very nice to use those as well. Very lucky considering it was a very low budget show. We really stretched the budget. I think we actually made the 1 point whatever million look like plenty more.
Dude, I did not know it was that low, because even that character is super cool looking.
We had a really a fantastic visual effects, like creature effects person. In fact, she's done almost all the Crypt TV stuff as well.
I forgot you said it was for them. I did a shoot with them, a photo or we did a documentary. My friend Nick Mim directed something called I can't remember what it was for, but it was for Crypt TV, and we were interviewing like local people who were kind of like horror enthusiasts and did one girl did like her own makeup effects for fun. There was just like vignettes of people in LA who liked horror. I think it was when Crypt like first launched.
Oh, so it was 2-3 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
I really like the team at Crypt.
They seem cool.
Yeah, I mean, for as low budget as we had to kind of push things, part of it was because of COVID. I really feel for them. If you ever want to have empathy for a person, make them a producer on a COVID show. It's like,
shit.
Oh, it's just too much, I think. But I really found that, man, they gave me a lot of freedom. I kind of couldn't believe it. I felt like I was somehow protected from something, which never happens to me.
That's kind of the thing with lower budgets, right? Like when there's nothing at stake, people just go like, have fun.
Well, I had heard that, in general, in the low budget universe, that like if there's like a corporate sponsor, that it actually becomes really complicated. Or
Sure.
you know what? I haven't done a lot of them, so I can tell you that much. But I have done a few series, and I definitely felt really throttled on some of them because I was given style instruction, and it wasn't what I believed could be done. I had one really strange experience where I had to make a short film with a director in order to be considered to shoot a series. And so we
Like a
rushed.
tryout?
Yeah, it was like a contest essentially. And all these
Wow, that's
directors were like competing to make short films, and so we made a short film, and they said you can't do, A, B, C, and D. And I was like, yeah, but like if this is going to be good, like and watchable, I think that visual variety and the ability to put the camera in a place that surprises you a little bit is going to be a benefit. I mean, I'm not giving you any context by which to describe all of this,
sure,
but
sure.
ultimately I broke all the rules, and a company-wide email went out directly following our submission saying, this is how you do it. I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, well,
This is what I'm talking about.
We had all these rules. It was like the amount of time we had to shoot it and all this stuff, like how you shoot it and the style you shoot it in, and it was like, they said handheld for everything. You can only shoot it over this period of time and blah, blah. And I'm like running around with my gimbal, and we're doing shots in the ocean, like underwater stuff and, all sorts of things. And in the end, they were like, this is fantastic.
Right.
And I was like, that's what AFI taught me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rules because AFI has to follow certain rules, and they tell you not to do a lot of things. And then when you do them, people judge the thing not on what rule you broke, but what the final product was. Somebody in their Sundance thank you for an award came up, and they had said something that I think it's a little bit of a truism, but I think it really is true actually. The happier team, the healthier team is going to make a healthier, better film. I feel a little bit like Users, for instance, very small team. We were relatively well funded, but I think, in the grand scheme of docs, we were definitely well funded. But I think Natalia chose to make this a family affair. There's only really like a few people that weren't in our family that were really closely involved in the production of it.
Yeah.
And, that leads to little tensions that are family related, and it leads to other things that make things complicated. But I think at the same time, she managed to always be a good leader in that she saw what we were doing, and she would definitely try to take the best of what we could do by complimenting us and trying to treat us like human beings all the time. And I think there's something inherently amazing about when that happens, because it makes you emphasize the positive, and that's the only thing you can think as a human you can offer to anyone else is confidence.
Yeah.
That was I got to, right before AFI, I got to my brother had done some volunteer work in Dharamsala, India, which is where the Dalai Lama and the government, the Tibetan government in exile, operates from. And he was working for the volunteering for the archive of the Dalai Lama, and they archive everything that he's ever said, basically via recordings, so audio recordings and video recordings, ever since the very first one. And they were digitizing all of it. And he convinced me, since I was about to start AFI, my life was about to shift. He was like, well, since you have a little bit of time before you go, come with me to India. He was going a second time, and we'll go work together. And he said, can you teach these guys cinematography, the monks who already shoot for VOA, which not everybody really knows in the US, but is known around the world as Voice of America, where video and radio is made in people's home countries, then edited in Washington, D.C., and then rebroadcast out locally again.
Interesting.
It was started during World War II because it's a little bit of a psychops in that
sure
you want to show that Americans, for people that you may have some complicated relations with, you want to be able to show that Americans and American values are generous. And that was their idea, was to point out that, like, yeah, the Germans may hate us, but ultimately we have values just like they probably have values.
Right.
And so this spread over time. I think now they're at a point where it's like over 100 countries have VOA, and it all pumps through one office in DC. It's amazing. But VOA for the Tibetans is really important because they broadcast it back over the border between India and China. So the Tibetans can see their own government's news ultimately. So anyway, we were there, and during that whole period of time, I have stories about some terrifying things that I experienced, but one really surprising thing was that they were determined to have the Dalai Lama meet my brother and I. And it was like, yeah, but he has so many things going on. Even 5 minutes seems a little bit lame. Like, he should be concentrating on things that aren't the Cerf brothers, like coming to help with the archive. But they made it happen regardless. And he was like finishing a teaching, of which he does usually somewhere between around 8 to 12 hours a day. He still does teaching every day. And meditates for 3 to 4 hours in the morning. He like walks up to us. What's that?
Discipline.
Oh man, that's the name of the game. He's amazingly disciplined.
Yeah.
But he just like walked up to us and put the white silk around our necks, and he said, I heard what you've been doing, and it's so fantastic. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for helping. And I was like, kind of speechless, like, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us. This is amazing. Yeah. And then he just kind of sort of, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, there's one thing that I feel like I've learned, because as you know, I am the physical form of empathy. This is what my job is. This is what I do. This is my existence. And he said to me, the one thing that we can give each other as human beings is confidence. He's like, I've been meditating on this for a long time, and that's what I've come up with. That's what I see now. And I was like, okay. He's like, well, bye. And he like takes off. And ever since then, I've tried to come at that from different angles. I've never fully been able to digest exactly the breadth of what he might mean, but I know that when I think about it, I think about being a leader and being a human being to work with and to be around for so many hours a day. That, yeah, confidence is the only thing you can really give, like you can't help much else than that.
Yeah.
And I can always offer assistance. I can be a listening ear. I can be all sorts of things, but ultimately what I can give to people is confidence, because ultimately when they're confident, it starts to spread and we actually produce things from that confidence.
Yeah. That's a really excellent, cause I definitely, in my Youth, which ended maybe about 15, 20 minutes ago. I was very quick to react. Really, I wasn't good to work with because I have this sort of thing that's like, well, no, we can do better. Not like you're doing it wrong, but it was always like, why are we not try? Like, I'd get really angry when people wouldn't try harder. But at the same time, I was a hypocrite because in my life I wasn't trying very hard, but it was very specific things that I would want to like send it on. And filmmaking was one of them. And so I was not a good leader, and I had to, getting into film as a career, I was getting hired a lot to be a director because, when you're an owner operator, they're like, can you just do it? You're like, I guess. And so I had to learn how to be a leader. And so there's I don't know if you've heard of him, this Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink wrote a book, Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership. And that was kind of a lot of, that book really helped me be a better director. Like, that's what I got out of it. But leave it to the Dalai Lama to succinctly put like 2 books worth of knowledge into, because it's not gassing people up, right? Giving people confidence isn't, oh, you're doing great, sweetie. It's like treating them like people, acknowledging fault, but then not, it has to be a teaching lesson, and it has to be quick, but you're also not correcting people. It's not, that is something you kind of have to meditate on.
Well, I think my latest version of it is actually kind of where you were going for a second with it, which is just an acknowledgement. I think that the reality is, like, I think there's an insecurity by association that happens when you first start. If you are insecure, not everybody is. I think the most successful people are just like, whatever, I'm not
balls
worried.
Out confidence. Yeah.
And I think that I felt very insecure at the beginning of my career and found myself saying the same thing, which is like, come on, guys, like, I'm putting everything into this. Why are you not putting everything into it? And it was really just an insecurity of being associated with something that couldn't be as amazing as what I imagined I could do, or that I was trying
with
to do.
No proof, at least from me. I had this idea that I would be amazing,
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is like, it's really hard to have like podcasts and schools where you hear about people talking so much about how it's like, I just did this and then here I am, I got 3 Oscars, and it's like, it's not that easy for everybody. Some people it's quick, but as you go along, I think for me, what I've learned, and sort of to tie it into what I think Dalai Lama was telling me in that moment, hopefully I'm interpreting this right, but maybe his goal was exactly this, is for me to never stop thinking about it. I think that what I got from it in my most recent iteration of it is that confidence is knowing that you're going to figure it out, because it's not result based. It's just confidence in your existential push to do something. And if you are like, okay, like, we want it to look a certain way, right? And we walk onto set and we're like, here we go. And we start the lighting process, and it might take 2 hours to get your condors out and your 18Ks out. And then you're like, ooh, it really doesn't look good. And I don't quite know what I did to make it wrong, but now it doesn't work. But it's in those moments that you have a choice to say, okay, confidence right now is to say, it's all right. If this isn't working, I can figure it out. If you can't figure it out, then at least believing that you can try to make it better than it is also confidence. Like, whatever you can do to basically not let your ego tell you what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the thing. It's like, it's funny. This director on Kinderfinger, there was one day that I was like, oh, it's not working the way I wanted to. We were shooting in this tunnel, and he just walked up to me, very worried about time. And he said to me quietly in my ear, which he did. This is grace, I think. When somebody just doesn't make a big deal out of it, he walked up to me and he was like, hey, I think this is taking a long time. I think you need to let go of what it is you thought this was going to be and try to make it as good as you can now. And I was like, okay, he just said exactly what the truth is and what I needed to know to let go for a second. And it changed everything. And that stuff, I think, still looks amazing. I think it ended up looking really great.
Would you say that confidence then is the permission to fail?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Roger Deakins has keyed from the wrong side. And he said like, oh, sorry, we got to redo it. He's admitted that much. I've seen it happen. It's fine. Yeah. You know, like he can do it. So I think it's okay. I think that those moments are the ones that bring you closer to the people around you. It's like nursing during an interview. Your struggle just brings your team closer to you. And the harder they see you struggle to try to do the right thing, the more they kind of have your back. If you haven't been, overly expectant of what they should be, Yeah.
So that is it from me and Bennett. Thank you so much for listening or watching. We will definitely have Bennett back on because he and I both agree that we could and did go for hours about all kinds of topics. So the reoccurring guests are piling up for Frame and Reference, which is great. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of the stuff I had to chop out was kind of off topic to a degree. Not all of it, but I had to find an hour and a half to cut out somewhere. So I'll probably be putting together, a couple for this episode and going forward, off-topic, quote-unquote, episodes for you guys to listen to if you're interested. So if you are, let me know. I'm probably going to do it anyway, but it'll be nice to know if there's actually an audience for it. Once again, thanks for listening, and thanks again to Bennett for spending that time with me. And as always, you will hear or see me the next time you choose to do that in your listening or watching venue of choice. It's a real weird sign off. Anyway, take care. Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Matbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.